Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Bull Take Podcast. I'm Austin Wader. You already know the man next to me in his dojo. That is Austin Hill. A little bit of a different feel here. Our recording device in person kind of ran out of storage for our NFL episode. So we decided, hey, we'll get that NBA episode out first, and then we'll do the NFL episode here at a later date. But yeah, it's Tuesday night. NBA play-in started. Austin, good to see you.
Yes, sir. It is good to see you. It's good to get after it. Yeah, we have a treat coming up. But yeah, I'm excited to get talking about the NFL. We're just a little bit closer to the NFL draft, a little bit closer to mock drafts as well.
Yes, sir. Those will be coming out this upcoming weekend. At least that's our plan, if not early next week, as the NFL draft is next Thursday. And I still have no clue what the Steelers are going to do. So I'm still terrified to death. Hopefully, you know what your Bears are doing, Austin. I hope so.
Yeah, I'm hoping we have some answers at the number one pick, and we'll go from there. But yeah, I hope we have our minds made up at number one, or we've done something wrong.
I hope so. But we talk about NBA play-in starts tonight. In case you missed it, go listen to our NBA episode. We give kind of our thoughts heading into the postseason without obviously knowing the official standings. But we're here at the play-in, so I thought we might as well talk about it. And the game that's literally tipping off as we're recording this in New Orleans, the Pelicans and the Lakers. And also, I'll be honest with you, I really don't know what to think about the Pelicans after that game on Sunday against the Lakers. But something tells me they're going to come ready to play tonight. I'm hoping, at least.
Yeah, I hope so as well. This is a really solid young team that we kind of talked about in the last episode. That's really got a nice foundation and could be on the cusp of something big. You really hinted at the health of this team is really been the big thing. You talk about Zion Williamson's played a good chunk of the season, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram. Those guys have been healthy, and this team is absolutely one of the more exciting squads out there right now. It'll be a wonder if they can turn it up here in the postseason because, like you said, they had an opportunity to clinch themselves a spot in the playoffs, no plan necessary, and they couldn't get the job done in the last game of the season.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, so might as well. Why don't you just give me a pick here? Lakers Pelicans. What you thinking?
I think overall the Pelicans are still the better team in this matchup. I think, had a rough game, but this is where things get serious. This is where it's on the line. As much as either one of these teams, correct me if I'm wrong, but the loser of this team still has another game left. So, still, not the highest pressure situation. But I think both teams are going to come to play. I think New Orleans plays a little bit harder than they played just a few nights ago, and gets the job done to clinch themselves a spot in the playoffs, especially since they know they should have already had.
Yeah, and I will just say, for the people who are watching this, the game's already happened. This is a beautiful uniform matchup, if I do say
Yeah.
so myself. The
Yeah.
red of the Pelicans jersey, the yellow of the Lakers jersey. Beautiful, beautiful job set with the right jersey choices. There's one thing I'm gonna do. I'm gonna overreact to what I saw on Sunday, and I'm gonna pick the Lakers to win for
That's fair.
obvious reasons. Um, but no, I'm expecting. I'm not. I wouldn't say LeBron. I'm expecting a big game from Anthony Davis. That's what I'm gonna say. I'm expecting a
That's
big game
fair.
from him. But the second game of the night, Kings and Warriors, I think there isn't much else that needs to be said there. These two teams always play each other close. It's a historic rivalry dating back to last year's first round series. And then obviously you factor in what occurred during that series. But this is a winner go home game tonight. This one, the loser's out. So a lot more tension. I have the Warriors in it, Austin. I'm wondering which side you're going to play with here. The game is in Sacramento to go on with it.
Yeah. My big question for you is: do you know if Malik Monk's going to play tonight or not?
I do not know off the top of my head if Malik. I know he's been dealing with that injury for the last couple of, well, it was felt like the last month of the season. So
Yeah, and then Kevin Herter obviously is out for the postseason with that arm injury, or at least it looks like he's going to be out for the postseason with that arm injury. So
I
I
hear
think maybe,
yeah. Is Ziggy in the
yeah,
background?
Ziggy's right here by the computer squeaking his toy. But
I,
yeah,
I was like, I think Ziggy wants to make another appearance. Don't forget the legendary Ziggy episode where I think he was here, he was there, he was everywhere.
yeah, he was a bunch of nonsense in that one. But yeah, I have to go Warriors here. I think honestly, again, I think the Kings are maybe the better team at full health. But right now the Warriors are hot, and that lack of two crucial pieces in Kevin Herter and Malik Monk. Whether Monk plays or not, I think he's still going to be hampered by that injury. I think the Warriors are probably going to dodge a bullet here and get the job done.
According to this article online, Monk recently told the Sacramento Bee his injury was feeling better than expected, but the Kings coach Mike Brown said Monday there is zero chance Monk plays against the Warriors, so he's not playing tonight. Um, yeah, and for that reason as well, due to some of those injuries, I'm gonna have to go with the Warriors for it as well. I just think that they're gonna be able to handle business, although it's a tough arena to play in, so I'll
Yeah,
give
for
him
sure.
that. All right, and then we already know you're going to pick Bulls and Hawks. We know which way you're going with the Bulls for that one, so I'll be going with the Bulls for that one too to save some time. But Sixers and Heat, I think we both know which way we're going with this one as well. It's playoff Jimmy time, Austin.
Yeah, this is where Jimmy Butler takes over. He's going to win this game, and truly, I'm hoping that the Miami Heat win this game. Team we met last year in the play-in for the Bulls' right to go to the playoffs on the line and be the eighth seed. And Miami had a tremendous comeback in the fourth quarter to get the job done against us. I hate playing Jimmy Butler in the playoffs. He's one of the most talented players. I think he's going to step up and take control, especially against the 76ers. But I also need him to win. I think the Sixers are, while still a difficult matchup for the Bulls, the easiest path to the playoffs for us.
Yeah, so those are our picks for the play in there. We will post our official picks for the postseason later this week whenever all the matchups are officially set. But now let's get into the NFL. This is an NFL episode here. And let's just jump into so the real plan. We're just going to go over some of the major talks about each teams and their big offseason moves. And yeah, let's get into it. So we're going to start in the AFC with the Miami Dolphins, and they're a team who uh you got to remember, the Buffalo Bills is who we're going to start with. We are sticking in AFC East. I got my notes mixed up here. But the Buffalo Bills also went through some changes as well. They were 40 million over the cap entering free agency, Austin. So something had to change, and they had to say goodbye to a lot, and I mean a lot of pieces that were key to the roster. You got Gabe Davis, who left, Stephon Diggs, who was traded, Ryan Bates, Mitch Morse, Leonard Floyd, Shaq Lawson, Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Mike Hyde. They lost a lot of key players on that team due to having to cut so much from the salary cap.
Yeah, I'm completely with you there. This really hampered this Buffalo Bills team, and it makes you start to wonder what's going to go on out there in the next couple of years. Obviously, this is part of the NFL today. It's just eventually you get to a point where you got to pay the best quarterbacks in the league what they deserve, and it's about being able to manage contracts and make financial decisions and the tough financial decisions and try to succeed. We obviously see that going on in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes and them still finding a way. So I don't think this is the end of the line for the Buffalo Bills, but it certainly does make things tougher. It'll be a wonder to see what Josh Allen can do with Stephon Diggs because it feels like, he's one of those first guys we started talking about, that third-year jump. You get that new wide receiver, that brand new shiny wide receiver, and the quarterback takes the next step. He's kind of like the first example of that in recent memory. And so we'll see, can he have the same kind of success without the guy who really seemed to boost his career?
That'll be a key, but that's what happens. You pay these quarterbacks this big money, you're going to have to lose at other spots. And Von Miller had to restructure his contract. But they got some decent replacements. They got Curtis Samuel and Matt Collins kind of fill some of the wide receiver spots. Some good pieces on the O line. They were able to re-sign AJ Epineza. They got Mike Edwards and Taylor Rapp in the secondary, Jordan Phillips on the D line. So they were able to fill in some quality pieces. You just wonder, if they're going to be able to give you that same level that was already there with the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I absolutely completely agree. I think Taylor Rapp and Mike Edwards are two very talented safeties, but you think about kind of the culture and the veteran leadership that Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde brought, as well as their performance on the field. And, there's some things that just can't be replaced. And so it'll be interesting to see where the leadership comes from. Can these guys step up or does somebody else step up? Does anybody step up at all? So, yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of trouble brewing right now in Buffalo, but it's time to see how they handle it and if the signings they make an impact.
Absolutely. But now we'll get to the next AFC team and the AFC East team, the one that I said first that we'll now get to. And that's the Miami Dolphins. They're a team who also went through a lot of changes, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. But they're one of their bigger losses in free agency was Robert Hunt, their starting guard, went to the Panthers. But their defense, I think the right word is decimated. Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, Emmanuel Ogbah, Andrew Van Ginkel, Raekwon Davis, Christian Wilkins, Jerome Baker, Eli Apple, Xavier Howard, Deshaun Elliott, Brandon Jones, all gone from a defense who I'm not even saying was an elite defense last year, but Austin, once again, multiple pieces on this defense are gone for a team who it honestly feels like they're going to have to outscore opponents at this rate.
Yeah, and we just talked about big contracts and having to pay some guys, but kind of talk about a big thing. I know you've got circled for this team. They still haven't even extended Tua Tagovailoa. So it's another situation where you some of these things you have to do to kind of manage the money, but it feels like sort of a mismanagement for the secondary, especially you talk about bringing in Jalen Ramsey, and while I think he's one of the top corners in the NFL, they let go of Byron Jones at the beginning of last year, letting go of Xavier Howard now. You can't have Jalen Ramsey everywhere, and it seems like kind of some of the mismanagement of the contracts in the secondary is hurting this team.
Yeah, it definitely is. And taking a look, obviously, at some of their signings they got to replace on this defense. The main ones, they got Kendall Fuller, and it's one of their new corners to pair with Ramsey. Jordan Poyer got signed. Defensive line, just a lot of depth pieces. Jordan Brooks comes over from Seattle at linebacker along with Anthony Walker. So they fill in the spots. Again, you just wonder on a defense that already had some issues last year against some of the top teams in AFC. Now you have even more guys that are looking to get fresh in this defensive scheme. This Dolphins team's going to have to score a lot of points, which we know they're capable of, but you just wonder how many games they will actually be capable of doing it.
Yeah, you look at the Dolphins from last year, and they scored a lot of points, but in the big games where they needed defense to step up to play against some of those top teams in the NFL, they weren't there, and it feels like that job just got a little bit harder for them.
It really did. Speaking of a team that has going to be having a difficult time for at least next year, we have the New England Patriots up next, and it kind of feels like a changing of the guard. Of course, Jerome Mayo taking over as the new head coach there, taking over for Belichick, kind of like a new reset for that roster. And no kidding, I mean, they let go of Mac Jones, Devontae Parker, Mike Gesicki, Matthew Slater, who's Hall of Famer, J.C. Jackson, Jalen Mills, Mac Wilson. It seems like they're letting go a lot of guys that were core or key pieces on the team whenever Belichick was around, and kind of they're not looking at. It feels like they're heading in the full direction of a new rebuild. Obviously, with trading Mac Jones away and setting them up at the number 3 pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of the right way to head with it. Obviously, I'm not gonna sit here and condone tanking, which I don't think is what they did this year. But I'm not going to condone maybe taking a future of tanking. But this is certainly a team that wants to get younger and wants to kind of bring in a new culture and a new era. Obviously, for as long as Belichick was here, this team was going to be a team that was going to try its absolute very best to compete and win Super Bowls. But now with Gerard Mayo coming in, I'm not saying that Gerard Mayo doesn't want to compete and he doesn't want to win Super Bowls. But obviously, less expectation from the fans, and he's going to have some room to grow and learn as head coach as this team brings in, of course, a rookie quarterback. It looks like to really kind of set this program in this franchise off in the right direction.
Yeah, and you take a look at some of their signings. They didn't make a lot of huge signings, but they were able to re-sign a lot of guys. They got their transition quarterback, at least while the young guy comes and develop Jacoby Brissett back. They signed Antonio Gibson. They got Kendrick Bourne back, KJ Osborne, Hunter Henry re-signed, Mike Owenu re-signed as well. Josh Uche re-signed to a very minimal deal that a lot of people really didn't think so. Kyle Duggar, he got talkie. It kind of feels like they're just bringing in pieces to fill out the roster while they get this rebuild underway. I mean, that feels like what we're seeing here for this roster.
Yeah, and I think what I'm kind of excited to see for this team is clearly they've made some signings. You talked about bringing Kyle Duggar back, bringing in Taki Taki. So they brought in some definitely solid assets for this team. This isn't just filler veteran guys to just fill out a roster. These are very talented NFL players that are starters on a lot of teams. You bring these guys in, you keep these guys around, and you try and still stay somewhat competitive even though maybe with a rookie quarterback that doesn't result in necessarily a playoff berth this season. But clearly they want to stay competitive. They're at least by the way they're building the roster so far. To me, doesn't show that they're looking to tank. They're looking to try and maybe bring in a new culture and a new way of winning right away.
Yeah, and of course, don't forget next week we're going to find out what quarterback or if they even go quarterback. I've heard many people say they could go wide receiver and look to get a quarterback later on. So that'll be a fun storyline. But our final team, the AFC East, the New York Jets. Look, just let's just get it simple here. They're going all in for Aaron Rodgers, and they've clearly said that with all the moves they made. They signed Mike Williams to a 1-year deal, even though he has injury history, but it's a good signing. They signed Tyron Smith from the Cowboys, who was very good. A lot of injury history. They sign or they trade for Hassan Reddick from the Eagles, bringing in Javon Kinlaw on the defensive line and really kind of removing some minor pieces on the roster. But it seems like they're just going all in on Aaron Rodgers for this next season. And I imagine that's going to include going all in on a great weapon for him come NFL draft next Thursday.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think, a huge thing to look at for this team is Aaron Rodgers is getting old. And so I commend them for going after this. He's coming off an Achilles injury, which really at this stage in his career could ultimately have been a career ender. So fortunate that he's even going to be able to come back and play NFL football. But, you know, that's got to be one of those things that lets you know right away, hey, time's a ticking. If they didn't already think that with getting an aging star quarterback, they certainly think it now with an Achilles injury. Hey, time's ticking. We don't have time to play around, and now it's time to get serious. I like the moves they've made. I think if guys can stay healthy, this is a good team that they've built. And this is plenty. This is like the right time in the AFC East. We just talked about teams that are like cutting players, or a complete rebuild in New England. And we've got the Jets that are going all in, making big signings and building a team. That's certainly one way to steal the division here and put yourself in the playoffs.
That AFC East is going to be very interesting next season. But now let's get to the AFC North. And we're going to start with the Baltimore Ravens, the team that was the #1 seed in the AFC playoffs last year. They made that incredible run to the AFC title game before losing to the Chiefs. But for the Ravens, they really haven't made a ton of big signings. There was one we'll get to here in a second. But some of the departures, obviously, you lose much of your running back room. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Dalvin Cook, Odell Beckham Jr. is gone. Morgan Moses was traded. You lose both your starting guards. But Austin, if there's one big thing, they haven't made a ton of huge signings. The two things they did that were very big, though, re-signed Justin Madubuike for $98 million. Very good to re-sign him. But also, Austin, they made way for the King to make his way to the AFC North.
Yeah, this was a great move. I feel bad for you because I've kind of been putting this in the air for the last for a lot of last season. I've been kind of hypothesizing this would be a good landing spot for Derrick Henry. I thought it made sense, and clearly so did the Baltimore Ravens because they made the move. But I really like this move for them, obviously. But the big thing to me, they've had a lot of losses, but I think the offensive line is going to be something they have to look at fixing right away. Obviously, like you said, a lot of lost a lot of starters. But I think losing Odell Beckham Jr., while a great player and he did a lot of good things for them in the time that he played, he was a little bit injury prone. And we really saw in that time that he was out for them, Zay Flowers really emerged as a solid option. And with kind of the heartbreak and the mistake that he made in that AFC Championship game, I certainly think he's going to come out with a chip on his shoulder. So while I still think you need to fill out the receiving core a little bit, I think really they've gained more than they've lost in most places, except for the offensive line.
I'm not looking forward to having to face Derrick Henry twice a year for the next 2 years. And with the hip drop tackle being banned, I don't know how anyone on our roster is going to be able to tackle him. So that's going to be a fun experiment for the Steelers next season. Um, Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, though, it's kind of a transition offseason for the Bengals. They're not rebuilding, they're not going all in. They're kind of moving some minor pieces around and bringing in some other guys. Of course, they trade away Joe Mixon. T. Higgins, we don't know for sure, although I'm hearing rumors he's going to be around next year. So you never really know. But if they get the right offer, I would imagine he might not come back. Tyler Boyd's gone. They lost DJ Reader, Chidobe Awuzie. But they brought in guys to replace it. Zach Moss. You brought in Mike Gesicki, who's a great piece. Trent Brown on the O line. You bring back Von Bell, and you bring in Geno Stone. So secondary added some good pieces, which we've both talked about a lot. When they let Jesse Bates go, it kind of felt like that secondary was losing some bit, but this is two really good signings.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think they got some recoveries in the safety depth. And while I think this team should have done more to keep Jesse Bates and pay him, Geno Stone really had a great year last year for the Baltimore Ravens. Um, and you talk about Von Bell coming back. That's the other guy that they lost last offseason. And so now getting him back, a guy that knows the system, a guy that the locker room is familiar with, those are two good moves for him. But yeah, kind of a transitionary period, just trying to stay relevant. But yeah, they haven't really had a huge, big splash move, and I wouldn't really expect that from this team right now. Obviously you have the issue with T. Higgins. This is a team trying to figure out who it's going to be able to keep for the long haul, and maybe who they have to start shipping out to stay relevant or to start compiling draft assets.
Yeah. And look, it's very simple for this team. They almost made the playoffs last year. If Joe Burrow's healthy, this team's a contender every year. It feels like as if they can have a healthy Joe Burrow, they are going to be just fine with this roster no matter what it feels like.
Absolutely.
But now let's get to the final team in the AFC North, the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this is a team who I'm a fan of, and I'm used to not a lot of moves happening for this team in the offseason. We make one or two minor signings, and then we're like, okay, let's do the Steeler way. Bit different this offseason. Entire overhaul of the QB room. Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky, all gone. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields come on in. Deontay Johnson is gone. Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace are gone as well. Mason Cole cut from the roster as well. And of course, the big heartbreaker for me, Presley Harvin, my punter, is officially cut. But the Steelers made some unique signs. I talked about the two quarterbacks that they were able to sign. But they got Cordero Patterson with the new kickoff rules. I thought that was really good. Getting Patrick Queen from the Ravens. I'm hoping that last year's production was him finally showing how great he can be and not playing off of Roquan Smith. They signed Deshaun Elliott, Miles Killebrew back to be the safeties. Got a new punter, and I talked about Dante Jackson, who they got a corner. So I like most of the moves the Steelers made. I just want some more help in the secondary. Find us a center and wide receiver. And I think this team, I'm not trying to get too try to anticipate a great season, but they have a chance. I'm excited to see what they can do next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I like how aggressive they've been this offseason, going out and trying to keep this team in good shape because there is a really good core, especially on the defense for this team to have a big, bright future, at least for the next couple of years, just to stay competitive. Obviously, they have a consistent name to keep in mind for Defensive Player of the Year every single year in TJ Watt. This is a team that should be trying to win, win, win. And so I like to move to go get Russell Wilson. His first year in Denver wasn't super great, but this year in Denver had this team in playoff contention. Maybe could have even made the playoffs had this team not benched him, so they could avoid making the playoffs. At the end of this regular season. So I like the signing of Russell Wilson, and signs a very team friendly 1 year deal that kind of meets everybody's needs. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and both sides can go their separate ways. If it does, both sides are interested in working out a long term deal, and you got Justin Fields to fall back on if anything doesn't work out in the relative short term future. So I think they put themselves in a good spot in the quarterback room, which clearly was just in shambles. It was a quarterback room marred with injuries, and lack of the big playability, and also being held back by an incapable offensive coordinator. So now seeing a new offensive coordinator and some very, very talented NFL quarterbacks, two guys who obviously one's been around for a while with the Super Bowl, and the other is definitely a starting caliber quarterback in this league. I think they set themselves up in a good spot to compete for the next few years.
I think so too. I'm interested to see what Arthur Smith's offense is going to be. Yeah, I'm interested. I wouldn't say I'm excited. I'm interested to see what it's going to be. I did appreciate. I know Austin. I know you didn't want your Bears to make that move for Justin Fields. I know, but uh, I'm hoping we'll take good care of him in Pittsburgh. That's my plan. Our plan is hopefully to treat him very good. That is at least what I'm hoping.
Yeah, he's the guy that I'll always be able to root for. It's a shame the way it kind of ended, but the Bears have made up their mind, it seems, and I've got to support that decision. But I will always have a soft spot in my heart for Justin Fields.
Absolutely. But now let's get to a team that you nailed their prediction in the preseason. The Houston Texans in the AFC South. And Austin, you want to talk about a team that has had a great offseason. How about the Houston Texans? They have made moves, not all in moves, but moves where they have gone from, okay, last year we have a rookie quarterback. Let's just see what we have with the roster to okay, we know we can compete with this kind of level quarterback who has shown how great he could be. Let's make some moves. And, letting Devin Singletary walk in free agency, people were kind of shocked. They acquired Joe Mixon. We've seen what he could do. Talk about upgrade the receiver room. Stephon Diggs, trading for him from the Bills for only a 6th and a 5th round pick. Or for a 2nd round pick, really. It's a great deal there for him. Dalton Schultz coming back. They're able to sign Aziz Al-Shahir. You got Danico Autry, and a big signing. They let Jonathan Grenard walk in free agency, and people were kind of like, why would you do that? He had a solid year. Well, they let the solid player walk so they can go get the elite player, Daniil Hunter, on a 2-year deal. Jeff Okuda back in that secondary. And they got a Super Bowl winning punter in Tommy Townsend. So Austin, they are making some moves that they want to be not just to compete in the AFC next year. They want to make some noise in the AFC next year.
Yeah, I absolutely love these moves. They went out and they got two incredible all pro talents out there in Stephon Diggs and Daniil Hunter. These are two very exciting veteran guys who have been there and done that, especially with the Minnesota Vikings. These are two guys that have been to an NFC Championship game, two guys who were big playmakers in route to that NFC Championship, as well as some other success out there in Minnesota. And you talk about the success that Stephon Diggs continued to have in Buffalo. I really love this move because the big thing we saw at the end of the year for the Houston Texans is, even though CJ Stroud really proved that he could do it with anybody, because no disrespect to guys like Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and Noah Brown, but they weren't the biggest names coming into it. Now, Tank Dell was the exciting young rookie, but you talk about Nico Collins and Noah Brown, who were really solid wide receivers in college at Michigan and Ohio State, respectively. But kind of since they had gotten into the NFL, hadn't lived up to that big hype that those guys had had. And they were kind of just seen as like filler guys to have out there. And they both had big explosive years. But when it came down to the end of the year, the receiving core got worn down. Tank Dell missed the postseason. Was it Noah Brown that got hurt in the playoffs as well?
I think
Uh,
so.
so, had some injuries to the receiving core. Go out, get you a guy who's a superstar wide receiver, and a guy that's got a tremendous track record of playing a ton of games in a season and having a ton of success throughout the season. I like this move to get Stephon Diggs, and I like the move that they did with the contract. Drop the option years off. Go ahead and just put him in the last year, big time year to prove it and earn yourself a big contract.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to see the Texans make some big jumps next year. As crazy that is to say, from what they did this year. Team that we also look forward to seeing out of the AFC South, the Indianapolis Colts. This is a team that usually doesn't make a lot of big moves since they're new regime has taken over. They've done a lot of re-signing guys as their big moves, but their big loss is obviously losing Gardner Minshew, who we'll talk about in a few minutes. Zach Moss, who we talked about, went to the Bengals. They brought in Joe Flacco. Uh, that's good. But they re-signed Michael Pittman. That was big. Signed DeForest Buckner to an extension. They brought in Raekwon Davis. They re-signed Kenny Moore, Zaire Franklin. This is a team that really does it in a way you don't see nowadays, which is building from within the roster and rebuilding the whole team without really using a lot of outside sources. So this is a typical offseason for the Colts in recent years.
Yeah, and I really like this offseason, though. They brought back a lot of guys that were super successful for them. They brought in Joe Flacco, which I really think is a great move. We saw what he could do last season in relief. And, you know, I'm excited to see what happens with Anthony Richardson when he comes back. He was obviously an explosive and exciting talent for the short time we got to see him last year. The big hope is that he's kind of learned to take care of himself a little bit more as he leaves the pocket, slide down. Sometimes you got to slide down. Sometimes you got to fall down and take the sack just to avoid taking the big hit. Hopefully, he's learned a couple lessons. But obviously, if not, or if something continues to nag him this season as we get through, they've got Joe Flacco to fall back on, who certainly can help this team. I really am excited to see what the Colts can do in this new era once they actually get Anthony Richardson in the flow of things again.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to see what they can do there. And another team would say I'm excited to see after the way they ended the season last year so roughly. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars. This was a team that was in contention for the 1 seed at one point in late in the season, keep in mind. And man, they just fell off of a cliff to end the year. Us Steeler fans do appreciate you guys losing to the Titans, allowing us to get in the playoffs, even though we had no business being there. We do appreciate it. But looking at this Jacksonville roster, they made some decent moves. They let Calvin Ridley walk to the Titans, which we'll talk about in a second why they did that. Caleb on Chase on gone, Darius Williams, but they brought in some good pieces. They acquired Mac Jones for a solid backup. They brought in Gabe Davis to kind of replace the role Calvin Ridley was there for. They brought in Mitch Morse at center, Ezra Cleveland. They did some really good things there. Signed Josh Allen to a big extension. Darnell Savage, and of course the big, and I mean the big piece, signing Eric Armstead to a 3-year, $51 million deal, taking him away from San Francisco and pairing him up with Josh Allen and make this defense a lot bigger of an issue to handle the pass rush.
Yeah, I really like the moves Jacksonville made because a lot of people could have said, "Oh, we got unlucky last year. We can run it back with this team and we can win this division." Clearly, they saw the danger in Houston, the danger in Indianapolis with those young quarterbacks and what these teams can do, and they saw that they needed to upgrade to stay relative and compete. And obviously, I think some of that has to do with some of the moves that Houston has also made this offseason. But still, this is a team that got complacent, and this is a team that said, hey, we've got to get better. We've got to get better if we want to go to the playoffs. And I absolutely love that mindset from them to improve this team and add some more talent so that they can go to the playoffs and avoid what happened last year.
And another team that's looking to avoid what happened last year, that's the Tennessee Titans. Of course, Brian Callahan taking over the new coaching role for the Titans after Mike Rabel was let go in what was kind of a surprise move. Of course, we talked about they lost Derrick Henry. They really got rid of a lot of older pieces on the team. Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, Andre Dillard, Aaron Brewer left to go to the Dolphins in a signing to Nico Autry, Sean Murphy Bunting, Terrell Owens. They let go of a lot of veteran pieces, and they brought in some solid replacements. Tony Pollard to pair up with Tajay Spears. They brought in Kenneth Murray on cheap deal. Chidobe Awuzie signed Calvin Ridley for that 4 years, 92 million with 50 million guaranteed. I'll just go ahead and say I understand why Jacksonville let him walk in free agency. No disrespect to Calvin Ridley, but with the production we've seen the last year or two, he was not, in my opinion, worth that contract.
Yeah, I completely agree with you here. The big thing for me for this team is uh, it's an interesting mindset. I kind of like the way they're going. I think Vrabel should still be here, but clearly they didn't feel the same way. And so they're building a new culture, kind of getting rid of a lot of those Vrabel era guys, if you will. And in doing so, I think they've done a good job still setting themselves up to try and be competitive. I think in today's NFL, there's no sense in not trying to win if you believe you have your franchise quarterback, because that's really the big key. We've seen what Patrick Mahomes has done being the franchise quarterback this past season without having as many big names. You know, he's got Travis Kelsey, but not a lot else going on the offense. So clearly, if you have your guy, going out and winning now with those guys is what is most important. So if this team really does believe in Will Levis, I love the way they've spent money and added pieces that could be big on the offense to help him out and commit to winning. Because if you got your star quarterback, there's no sense in trying to tank or lose games to increase your draft capital, because really you should be trying to get up to the top and get quarterbacks in these drafts and fill out everywhere else later on in the draft. So I like the move to try and stay competitive and stay on par with the two other teams in this division that'll have second year quarterbacks coming into this year.
Yeah, and one of the, of course, the other big moves they made, Chidobe Awuzie, bringing him, and the big acquisition not that long ago, L'Jarius Sneed from the Chiefs, got him for a third round pick, and a couple of pick swaps, but they did pay him a good chunk of money, and that's what again that was the price for getting him. But you talked about it, getting pieces to surround the quarterback, but also getting some great solid corners to go out there and play coverage for you. I'm very interested to see what this Titans defense is going to look like for next year. They have a lot of solid pieces. They let go with some key guys on the D line and linebacker spot, but they have a couple of pieces that I think could be really good for their defense.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And that's it for that. Let's go to the AFC West now, where we have the Denver Broncos, who look, let's just say it. They have made a ton of big moves, as in acquisitions. They made a lot of guys go, to say the least. Russell Wilson gone, Jerry Judy trade to the Browns, Lloyd Cushenberry, underrated centers, going to the Titans, Josie Jewell to the Panthers, Fabian Monroe gone, Justin Simmons gone. And for their big signings, really not a lot. Josh Reynolds, one of the main ones, a couple of depth pieces, Malcolm Roach, Cody Barton. There's really not a lot there for the Broncos, and you wonder if they kind of realize, you talked about earlier whenever we talked about Russell Wilson with the Steelers, if they just said, hey, look, we learned our lesson from it. Let's just try to reset things and kind of reset the roster and go with some of the young guys who performed well when given the chance late in the season this past year.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I think when I really think of the Denver Broncos is I think this team's really been mismanaged since Peyton Manning retired. It feels like since then this team has made bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. It's really prevented this organization from getting off the ground and running again. I think they're just trying to chase that. It feels like, almost every other year for them, they're going, we're competing to, oh, we're rebuilding, and then right back to competing. And, you just can't get a sense for this team. And I think what this team needs is a really solid reset. I know you're paying Sean Payton some big money. I know that you traded draft picks for him. But I think regardless of whether he decides to stick around for a rebuild or not, that is the way to send this team forward. Obviously, the culture in the NFL right now is build through the draft, get your core franchise players in the draft, and then use the trades and free agency to add some star pieces around those guys. That's kind of what we're seeing right now in the NFL. I think going out and just making big splash after big splash, especially when you're reaping no rewards, drains your draft capital, kills your fan base, and makes you look like a fool as a GM and an owner. I think this team really needs to take a reset, look at themselves, and say, hey, we've got to take some time to rebuild this team before we can be competitive again.
Yeah, absolutely. And now moving on to the team. Speaking of teams that were super competitive, we have the reigning and defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And look, they haven't made a ton of big moves either, but they've re-signed Chris Jones. That was their big signing. Hollywood Brown was signed to a 1-year prove-it deal. I won't forget. about Carson Wentz, the Super Bowl winning quarterback who's coming in.
Yep.
He's going to compete with Mahomes, as I've heard from some people. I mean, they're both Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, so you really never know there. Um,
Yep. MVP votes for Carson Wentz. Don't forget.
Yeah, don't forget. But you tell what they were some guys they let go. They really replaced some of the guys who were, as crazy as to say, not that helpful for the Super Bowl team and brought in pieces. Now, obviously, two big things have occurred recently. Number one, L'Jarius Sneed being traded away, kind of causing, a little bit less depth to their cornerback room. And number two, just even with all the issues of wide receiver, it somehow got worse with Rasheed Rice and the situation he's in right now. So Chiefs, we know they're still going to be there no matter what at the end of the year, despite all that happens in this offseason. But interesting offseason for the Chiefs. They re-signed the big guys, but there's some interesting spots where there might be a weakness there that wasn't there last year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of how this team attacks, but obviously an issue last year was the receiving core. It seemed like Rasheed Rice was a good place to start. Obviously, remains to be seen what's going to happen with him. But you bring in Hollywood Brown. I think he's a solid piece to have on a team. Certainly better than Kadarius Toney and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. But certainly, I think they should go ahead and look to get another sneaky Andy Reid guy here in the draft. They've done it with Rasheed Rice. They've done it with Tyreek Hill, Sky Moore. It seems like they find a lot of these guys. They kind of just blend in and play that wide receiver position for them pretty well. I think they need to go out and get another one of those guys here in the offseason, whether it's through the free agency or the draft, to really help with this team because it seems like those Andy Reid guys always seem to take off and find stride right when they need them to.
Yeah, and we know that this is a great wide receiver class coming up in this draft where they could get one in the second or third round if they wanted to. So, yeah, I'm imagining we're going to see some big moves from the Chiefs at least in the draft when it comes to getting some more wide receiver depth there. But another team in that division, we're going to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Antonio Pierce now the full-time head coach. Thank goodness the Raiders didn't screw it up like they did a few years ago with Rich Bisaccia. They kept the interim coach who helped the team do good. And they made some pretty solid moves in the offseason. Of course, they signed Gardner Minshew to come in and compete with Aiden O'Connell. You don't know still what they're doing with quarterback in the draft. That remains to be seen. They signed Alexander Madison. And they did lose, of course, Josh Jacobs, who we're going to get to here in a little bit, which hurts the roster. But their defense got so much better with this signing of Christian Wilkins from the Miami Dolphins. 4 years, 110 million, and now he is paired up with Max Crosby on that defensive line. And honestly, with Antonio Pierce, this feels like this would be a defensive team. I hope the O-lines and AFC West are ready to face this duo because it's going to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw what this team was able to do at the end of the season under Antonio Pierce. So I think that's absolutely huge for them. But to me, I'll say this much: they haven't done a lot, but they've done a lot with little last year. They didn't have a great team last year, and they were able to kind of they got a big win against the Kansas City Chiefs on Thanksgiving. This was an entertaining team to watch. I think with a full year of that culture, you build a lot and, expect something from this team. I don't know if they'll be a playoff team, but this is a team that I think is going to compete and give teams fight week in and week out because that's the culture that's brewing in Las Vegas. Finally, this organization did it right after a big stretch of time where they were doing it wrong.
Yeah, good to see that for them. I'm interested to see what they do in the draft. So we talk about never rule out another quarterback going there. But the final team in the AFC, we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. Jim Harbaugh taking over there, and he took over, and they have made some moves. With him living in his RV all summer, they have made some interesting moves. A lot of players gone from the original regime. Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett. You talk Eric Kendricks, Kenneth Murray, Michael Davis, and really they haven't brought in a lot of big pieces. They signed Gus Edwards, who fits in well with the kind of scheme that Harbaugh wants to go there. Troy Dye, solid linebacker, Perriman, Bolton, really. but it seems like they're kind of just trying to reset the roster a bit and figure out what they want to do for the future with Coach Harbaugh and what the path is for this team. But they're keeping Herbert around. That's one thing that Harbaugh said is he wants this team to be able to run the football and protect Justin Herbert. So I imagine O-line is something he's going to look to focus on in the draft next Thursday.
Yeah, honestly, I was surprised to see Bosa and Max contracts restructured. It felt like something that would have helped them a little more if they traded those guys off or released those guys, money wise. But I guess they want to remain somewhat competitive. Those are two very solid guys to have on the defense. But I really don't understand. I know that Austin Eckler didn't have the big season that the Chargers wanted him to have and that he wanted to have last year after the contract disputes. But you talk about wanting to run the ball with the team. There aren't very many better guys in the league at running the ball than Austin Eckler, in my opinion. Um, I know that the money was a bit of a dispute, but I just don't get it. I think thinking that Gus Edwards is going to be a substantial replacement to make this team all of a sudden function, I think is the wrong way to go about it. So obviously, there's still a draft. I bet he's looking to sneak one of his Michigan running backs here in the second or third round of the NFL draft. But it does surprise me that it seemed there was little to no effort to keep Austin Eckler for a team that wants to run the ball.
Yeah, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the Chargers do come draft night again. That's next Thursday. But now let's get to the NFC, and we're going to start with everyone's favorite team. And that's the Dallas Cowboys. And Austin, the mantra we heard all entering the offseason from Jerry Jones is we're going all in. We're going all in. This is the year we're going all in on the roster. And if he was going all in, I think he meant he was going all in on getting rid of guys who were around on the team last year. I mean, you name it: Tony Pollard, Michael Gallup, Tyron Smith, Tyler Day, Dante Fowler Jr., Gallimore, Hankins, Leighton Vander Esch, Stephon Gilmore, Ron Curse. Yeah, all gone from the team. And don't worry, they have made a ton of big signings. Don't you worry, they have made a ton of big signings this offseason. The huge one, Eric Kendricks, their long snapper, and one that just I learned recently that actually broke whenever we were discussing the other teams, Royce Freeman signing a 1-year deal with the
Wow.
Cowboys for the running back spot. But that's it. So I wonder if we just got confused on what Jerry Jones meant by all in, because this does not feel like all in to me, Austin, if we're being honest here.
No, I'm completely with you, and it feels like we're getting to a point where maybe it's time for the Cowboys to do a little resetting of their own. I think that would be wise for this team, but boy, it is shocking to see what's going on in Dallas. How beyond mismanaged they are right now. I think it would be wise for Jerry Jones to step down and let somebody else call the shots for this team.
And this team is entering the year. Mike McCarthy, his final year of his contract. Dak Prescott's entering the final year of his contract. So it kind of feels like if things do not go well this next season, there will be, as crazy as say, with a lot of cuts this offseason, there will be even more changes come next offseason for the Cowboys. So big year for them and an interesting offseason to say the least. Another team's had an interesting offseason. That's the New York Giants in the NFC East, and really due to the fact that they let go of their main pieces of Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley, let them go to NFC rivals and let go of some other pieces. And people in the Giants, Giants fans that I know are like, why are we going to do anything big to go along with this? And no disrespect to Devin Singletary and John Runyon, very good pieces to sign for the team. Drew Lock, a solid backup, but they needed a big splash as they were able to, of course, also re-sign Isaiah Simmons. But the big splash, acquiring the edge Brian Burns from the Panthers, um, along with a fifth-round pick in exchange for a second and a fifth-round pick and a other fifth-round pick for the Panthers. This was the big move they needed to make for that defense to pair him up with Kayvon Thibodeau. But still, there's some question marks on this Giants team, to say the least. But this is a good pairing on that defensive line.
Yeah, I really love this move. for the Giants because, like you said, didn't have a lot going on for them. Kind of down in the dumps if you were a Giants fan, which can completely understand that perspective. But uh, this is going to be a good move for them for the future. This is incredible for the New York Giants and kind of what they're building right now as far as their defense is concerned, because we saw that defense really carried them a lot last offseason. Um, but you have to wonder what kind of effect that's going to have on the offense. At least last year they had Saquon Barkley to kind of rely on. Now it's going to be a lot more heavy lifting for Daniel Jones if he's healthy enough to continue to play the quarterback position. I don't know. All in all, I think a good move on Brian Burns, but they went all in on themselves last year, and now they've kind of paid the price for it. And we'll see what that leaves the team's offense and the team overall heading into this next season.
Yeah, and you talk about Daniel Jones. I still wouldn't rule out him being the starter for next year. The Giants visited with Jaden Daniels. I'm imagining they're visited with other quarterbacks as well. So I would not rule out them drafting a quarterback first or second round in the NFL draft either. Philadelphia Eagles up next, and they're a team that kind of, I mean, who am I saying kind of? They did disappoint last year after what was a great start for them coming off a Super Bowl year. Um, but man, terrible finish to the season. Nick Sirianni almost had people wondering a year after not after making the Super Bowl, people wonder if he was going to get fired. And that, in my opinion, and you've said it with me, we both agree the assistant coaches that left in the offseason, both were such key factors on that roster, even more than we probably even realized. But looking at their offseason, some of the big moves they made, when it comes to releasing players, obviously, they had to trade away Hassan Reddick. Jason Kelsey retired. Fletcher Cox retired. DeAndre Swift left to go to another team that we'll talk about in a second. Kevin Byard gone to another team that we'll get to here in a minute. But some of their good signings, they signed Saquon Barkley, another great piece of that running game. Landon Dickerson got signed as one of the best, highest paid guards. They brought in Bryce Huff to kind of replace Hassan Reddick. So those are some good pieces. And of course, the secondary, they made some moves. Avonte Maddox, getting CJ Gardner Johnson to go along with it. So it's not a bad offseason for them. But the big thing clearly wasn't, the talent on the roster was there to get them to that 10-1 start. It's how are they going to finish this season whenever we get to they say whenever it gets to December, that's the big point of the season. How are they going to finish?
Yeah, I think they made some good additions, but you're absolutely right. The question was never the talent on this team, and you start to wonder. It felt like not only was Sirianni kind of struggling with new assistants and such, but it felt like he just lost control of the locker room this season. Guys just arguing with each other on the sideline, in the locker room, all kinds of issues leading to this kind of spiral out of control last season. And I think the off season right now is a good time to get those egos in check and get everybody in check and get everybody on the same page. Hey, we all want the same thing. We want to go back to the Super Bowl and we want to get the job done. And I think this year we'll see if Nick Sirianni is truly the guy. I hate to say guy's on the hot seat 2 years removed from winning the Super Bowl, but you start to see it. If you start to see that same kind of nonsense going on in the locker room and on the sideline, that's an embarrassment to the team and the organization and the city. And you've got to be better than that as a head coach. You can't have them running around like preschoolers on the sideline.
No, no, you can't. You can't let the security detail do it either.
Yeah.
So, but the next team, Washington Commanders, we'll go ahead and get to them. They're a team that's in a full rebuild, and of course, a reset. Dan Quinn takes over in his second run as a head coach in the NFL. And they made a lot of moves. They let go of a lot of pieces that were there under, Ron Rivera in the previous regime. Of course, the two big pieces that are, three pieces that are gone from it. Curtis Samuel, you got Kendall Fuller, Cameron Curl, all gone to different teams. And they made some signings that were, interesting, for a few years ago. Obviously, signing Marcus Mariota, getting Austin Eckler, Zach Ertz, Nick Algretti, Tyler Biadasz, Cleveland Farrell, Dante Fowler, Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin. I mean, they're filling out this roster well. But it's and one thing you talk about with the other teams when we're talking about this is not just bringing in guys to fill a spot. These are talented guys. You just wonder if they're still at their peak years in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to say, kind of like what I said with New England. I like some of these moves because it brings in veteran pieces with a little bit of talent. I really think this team should have kept Cameron Curl, a little bit of Arkansas bias there, but I think he's one of the more talented safeties in the NFL. Could have been a guy to have as the future in that secondary. But they bring in a lot of guys that do have talent and can certainly help this team stay relevant over these next couple of years as you start to adjust with your hopeful franchise quarterback and get ready to gear up to try and win some games. But it's a wonder with a lot of these guys that they signed a little bit older than a lot of the guys that New England signed. And so, like you said, you wonder if these guys are still going to be at the top of their game and performing. But if so, I think these are some good moves that can help this team uh, start to change the course a little bit, change the culture.
Yeah, definitely. But now let's get to the NFC North, and we're going to start with this man's favorite team over here. That's the Chicago Bears. They have made some moves this offseason. I'll say them really quickly, and then I will pass it on to this man to let him talk about them. Of course, the big one trading away Justin Fields. Darnell Mooney is gone from the team. Robert Tunyon, Cody Whitehair, Yannick Ngakwe, Eddie Jackson. But you look at the pieces they brought in, signed DeAndre Swift, acquired Keenan Allen, brought in Ryan Bates. They got Gerald Everett at tight end. Jalen Johnson was re-signed. That was a big thing. And bringing in some safeties, Kevin Byard and Jonathan Owens. Some good pieces for the Bears that they were kind of able to bring in there. But yeah, the floor is yours, Austin. Take it away.
Yeah, obviously I won't go too much more into detail on the Justin Fields deal. Talked about it a lot there, but seems the Bears have made up their mind on what they want to do, and I hope they've made up their minds on what they want to do. And whether I think one player or the other is the best quarterback in this draft, clearly the consensus amongst everybody who knows something about football is that Caleb Williams is the number one guy, and if that's the case, then that should be the only guy on the Bears' mind with the number one pick. Um, and so, I'm going to have to support that decision. If you listen to the Bull Take podcast ever, we weren't the biggest USC Caleb Williams fans. But, sometimes things have got to change. And so we'll see what happens with Caleb Williams. But he's got a lot to be excited about if he is indeed headed to Chicago. Maybe the best situation a number one overall pick's ever been. And you talk about getting Ryan Bates to kind of basically take over on the offensive line and help out in that interior after parting ways with Cody Whitehair this offseason. I like the addition of DeAndre Swift. I think that takes our running back room to another level. Especially in the receiving game. That's kind of an underrated aspect of DeAndre Swift's game is how well he works catching the ball. Gerald Everett, a solid number two tight end. We like to bring out two tight end sets a lot. We like to give Cole Kmet rest, keep him healthy. And Robert Tunyon was absolutely abysmal last year. Dropped a lot of wide open touchdowns. I can't 100% confirm that he wasn't just a plant from the Green Bay Packers to make sure that we had a lack of success last season. But I like Gerald Everett. He really had a solid time with the Chargers and Justin Herbert, a guy who likes to throw to his tight end a lot. And then the big move, the one that I really like here is obviously getting Keenan Allen. I'm a big Keenan Allen guy. I think he's one of the more talented receivers in the NFL, but it's exciting to be able to pair two of, in my opinion, the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL, put them two on the same team, and give them to a rookie quarterback. I think the number one overall pick has never been a more appealing pick to be than it is right now in Chicago. Obviously, it comes with the glitz and glamour of being regarded as the best in your class. But now you get a solid team and a solid core to come with it. And I think that sets us up for something pretty exciting.
Absolutely for him, but I'm excited to see what they do. But another team I'm excited to see what they did this offseason. That's the Detroit Lions. Of course, how are they going to uh, come back after the way they had such a phenomenal season last year? But they had to replace some pieces on the roster that left in free agency. C.J. Gardner Johnson, Jonah Jackson left, Josh Reynolds, Tracy Walker III, Tyson Alalalu. They lost some pieces, but they brought in some good replacements, I think. Kevin Zeitler has joined the team. They signed DJ Reader, I think one of the more underrated signings in this entire free agency class. Amik Robertson in the secondary. They acquired Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay. So they made a couple of good pieces. Another thing to remember, we thought this entire coaching staff, Ben Johnson and all them, were going to be gone. We thought they'd be head coaches entering this offseason, Austin, but all those guys are back. So that's got to make you feel good regardless of whatever's happened this offseason, whatever happens in this draft. The main core is back from a team that made the NFC Championship game last year.
Yeah, I think I'm completely with you. I think that's something that's exciting, and that shows how bought in everybody is to this. That your coordinators who both have opportunities to go be head coaches somewhere else. I mean, we're not just talking about interviews; we're talking about job offers to go somewhere else. And these guys turn those offers down, stay in town, and say, "Hey, we've got a job that needs to be finished." I think that's exciting for the Detroit Lions. I think while they lost some this offseason, they've gained in other areas, like you said, DJ Reader helped them up front, right up the middle. It's that seems to be the weakest part of that defensive line for them is right up the middle. And now you get somebody like DJ Reader in there. It's going to be hard to do anything against this defensive line this season. I like how bought in everybody is in Detroit. It really feels like that culture is changed in Detroit. And this is a team that went from being the laughing stock of the NFL to being a serious contender for a Super Bowl coming into 2024.
Absolutely. And another team that could be a contender entering the next year is a team I know you don't like talking about, but we're going to talk about them, the Green Bay Packers. They have made some moves. Obviously, the thumbs down there you see by them, but they made some moves in the offseason. Really haven't made a lot, but they made some very notable moves. They're big ones, two ones. Number one, they signed Xavier McKinney away from the Giants, which is very big for their secondary, to pair with Jair Alexander. And number two, they signed Josh Jacobs away from the Raiders on a 4-year deal, which is a big deal. And, for an hour after the Josh Jacobs signing happened, we all wondered, we were like, man, Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones, that's going to be an unstoppable duo with Jordan Love at quarterback to go along with them. It's going to be tough to figure that out and how to defend that. That lasted an hour. Yeah, Aaron Jones was released after being asked to take another pay cut after he had already taken a pay cut from the Packers roster. But you say the other guy they lost, David Bakhtiari, John Runyon, Devondre Campbell, Darnell Savage. The two big signings they made are big, but losing a heart and soul of the team like Aaron Jones, that's gotta. I mean, I'm interested to see how much that affects this team next year because everyone loved him in Green Bay.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what Josh Jacobs brings to this backfield. But I think overall, while I think Aaron Jones is a starting caliber running back, and it made sense to me for him to not have to take another pay cut to essentially become the number two guy in Green Bay, I still think that Josh Jacobs is definitely an upgrade for this team. And so I think, we saw a lot of success out of Jordan Love, and going out there and getting a piece that's going to help take some more pressure off of him, I think is always a huge thing to do for a young quarterback. And it's interesting to see what's going on in Green Bay because it's a new era. No more Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love took this team to the playoffs. And, still a lot of excitement out there, and I hate it. And they always seem to be able to get the most. It feels like they've lost a bunch of guys. They still always seem to find the right guys to get in and just maximize their ability. So I don't put anything past the Green Bay Packers, but I wish them nothing but the worst.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, I'll agree with that because I'm still mad about Super Bowl 45. So yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah. The last team in NFC North, we're going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings here. And they're a team. Look, let's just cut it simple. The number one thing was what they were going to do with Kirk Cousins. They decided to let him walk. Why? We'll tell you in a minute. And what I thought was a very good choice for them. They
Yeah.
signed Sam Darnold as kind of a guy to sit there, of course, to go along with the quarterback we expect them to pick in the NFL draft, as they acquired another first round pick, I think about a month or two ago. So now they have multiple first round picks. People think they could be jumping up or looking to use a quarterback with one pick and another player with that second first round pick. But of course, some other players they let go in free agency, of course, KJ Osborne, Alexander Madison, Anthony Barr, Jordan Hicks, Daniil Hunter, of course. They made some solid signings. Of course, Aaron Jones, they brought him in after Green Bay released him, which is funny for obvious reasons. Jonathan Grenard coming over from Houston, kind of a swap with Daniil Hunter and the Texans. Andrew Van Ginkel coming over from the Dolphins. Jerry Tillery, Gruger Hill, Shaquille Griffin. This is a team that, I mean, we've seen what they can be whenever they win the close games and what they are when they can't win the close games. It just comes down to when are we going to have this roster talented enough for the Vikings to not just look at a close game and say, well, that's it. That close game cost us our season.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And this is, I feel like, as wrong as this sounds for me to say, this I feel like if you're a rookie quarterback, this is another desirable situation to come into. You've got Jordan Addison and JJ Justin Jefferson, uh, who are two solid wide receivers. You're getting Aaron Jones, who's a premier back in the NFL. You're seeing kind of a revamped defense, and while it's gonna, obviously be seen if these defensive pieces are as good as the pieces that they lost. They've at least tried to replace those pieces with quality NFL starters. So it looks like while this team was willing to part with Kirk Cousins, which I think was the right move considering the money that he ended up garnering, they still want to stay competitive and want to give whoever comes in to play quarterback for this team ample opportunity to propel this team back into the postseason.
Yeah, definitely. But now let's get to the NFC South. And speaking of talking about Kirk Cousins, we're going to talk about the team he went to, which was the Atlanta Falcons. And look, let's just say before we talk about anything else the Falcons did, Kirk Cousins' agent is one of the smoothest human beings I've ever seen.
He
A
has
man
put on
coming
a
off that is 30,
masterclass.
yeah, coming off 35, 36 years old, coming off a ruptured Achilles. Kirk Cousins gets a 4-year, $180 million contract that includes a $50 million signing bonus. He receives $100 million guaranteed, including $90 million in the first 2 years of the contract and another $10 million in the year after that. I mean, that's a masterclass. I don't know what else to say. This is the greatest agent I've ever seen. Can I get him for me? That's the question I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, we just look at what he's done for Kirk Cousins throughout his entire career, and this guy should be in some kind of Hall of Fame. He truly has mastered his craft. But Atlanta, they seem to be wanting to take a step in the right direction. Obviously, bringing in Ricky Morris to be the new head coach, giving him another opportunity, which you really like to see from this team. But man, this Atlanta roster is it's interesting to look at because it has a lot of pieces that could be successful, but we haven't really seen pan out yet. And we'll see if Kirk Cousins is able to unlock it. But clearly, they have been in the running for the AFC South the last 2 years, even as poorly as they've played. And like we said, it's just a matter of did they want it, and they haven't wanted it. Well, this year it feels like they want it. And while I think that the champs of the AFC South last year and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have made plenty of moves to keep themselves competitive. I still don't think this is a one dog race. I think this is open to anybody if they want it in the AFC South, like it's been the last couple of years. And now it feels like finally the Atlanta Falcons want it.
They definitely did. And I'll just add in some minor signings they did. Of course, they traded Desmond Ritter away, acquired Rondale Moore in that deal. They got Darnell Mooney in free agency as well. Really, that's the two major signings for them. They got Eddie Goldman to come out of retirement and sign with the team. Of course, former Chicago Bear there, so
Yeah.
some familiarity there. But taking a look at the next team in the NFC South, that's the Carolina Panthers. This is a team who, look, let's just face it, they flat out were terrible last year. This was a disaster of a team. Dave Canales comes in his first head coaching job ever. Um, and the one thing looking at his offseason, what the Panthers did well, they got protection for Bryce Young. At least it looks like it. Obviously, we'll see if they pan out, but it looks like they did. Paid Robert Hunt, an offensive guard, 5 years, $100 million to come be on the O line. Damian Lewis, another man, 4 years, 53 million. They got Jadeveon Clowney to come on a short 2-year deal. But of course, the big news, obviously trading away Brian Burns, not for the amount of package that they originally wanted. But even though that package may not have been what they wanted for Brian Burns, it's clear that they're trying to get protection for Bryce Young, which is a really good thing you like to see.
Yeah, I think that's a big win this offseason. I think clearly this team got a little bit more serious this offseason. I think last year, the one thing you do want to do when you win, when you trade away your first round pick in the next season, is you do not want to make that pick the number one pick. And they could not avoid that. I feel like last year they weren't serious enough. They didn't take the time to sign the right pieces to make sure that this team did something last year. Uh, and in turn, that resulted in being the worst team in the NFL. So this offseason, I think obviously they learned from their mistake. They took it a little bit more seriously, at least thus far, and have worked to protect Bryce Young. And that's something that is obviously going to immediately translate to better performance in the games.
It can't get much worse, I will say that. But they did bring in also Deontay Johnson to go along with it in a trade. So they got him another weapon at least to get the football to him. So it'll be interesting to see how that Panthers team can somewhat improve from last year. But next up, we're going to talk about the New Orleans Saints. This is a team who, speaking of masterclass by the agent of Kirk Cousins, the masterclass this team always seems to do whenever they get in salary cap issues every single year for let's feel like the past 10 years. And we're like, man, they're going to have to cut so much. They're going to have to trade so many guys. They keep on getting them to restructure their deals. It's ridiculous how they keep on doing this and get under salary cap without suffering major significant losses on their roster. It's truly unbelievable there. But of course, they're really the players they lost their free agency, not a ton of big ones. Jameis Winston gone, Michael Thomas, who they were cutting anyway, Marcus May, Cameron Irving. But their signings really not a lot, obviously, because of the cap issues. But a big thing, they signed Willie Gay Jr., Jonathan Abrams, and they brought in Chase Young. That's where their big deal on a 2-year deal. So this team, we still know they're going to be competing for around that playoff spot, Austin, because they keep on pulling off wizardry with this cap space.
Yeah, their account is a master, and somebody needs to check the payroll. I feel like maybe they've got a hypnotist on payroll that's tricking these players to try and convince them to, take smaller deals and rework these contracts because it's just something about it, something about this culture in New Orleans. But I've been saying this for the last couple of years. The AFC or the NFC South is wide open for anybody to win if you want it. And it's always a win for the New Orleans Saints to be able to keep this team together, this core together, to try and make another run at it. So I think they've done right by the team to stay competitive. They've kept everybody in town by some miracle financially. I don't understand. And they've added a couple pieces that I think help make them a competitor in the division.
Yeah, and we know how close that division was last year and how hectic it was. And of course, the last team we're going to talk about, the team that won that division last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And they're a team that really, they haven't made a ton of big signings in free agency. Theirs has mainly been re-signings on that roster. Their worst losses come on Ryan Jensen, who retired due to injuries. Trade away Carlton Davis. Devin White left in free agency to the Eagles. Shaq Barrett is gone. But they re-signed a lot of big key pieces. Number one, Baker Mayfield getting $100 million deal with the team in a prove-it year. And it's safe to say he definitely proved it with his performance leading them to that division title, getting a playoff win. They were able to re-sign Mike Evans to a 2-year, $52 million deal, which is something we really didn't think was a shot at that happening for him. Levante David is back on the roster. William Golston is back on the roster. You got Antoine Whitfield, receiving that non-exclusive franchise tag. So a lot of the key pieces are back from this team, not a lot of big acquisitions, which is fine by them because this team was talented enough to get to the NFC divisional round and was close to making an NFC conference championship game just last season.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Similar to what I said for New Orleans, being able to keep this core together is a win in itself. I like what they were able to do by, especially with keeping Mike Evans. That was the biggest thing for me this offseason is he's that number one guy. He's had however many straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons to start a career. It's one of the most incredible runs any receiver's ever been on. He truly is impressive, and he's really been the heart and soul of this team for a long time. And so I was, while happy at the opportunity maybe of Mike Evans being able to go in free agency and join the Chicago Bears or someone else I thought might be fun to see. I was also, a bit shaken and surprised to see them let such a talented player who's still proving he's talented in year whatever now for this team, such a solid contributor and, such an icon for the city and the franchise. So I was glad to see that they were able to not only hash out a deal with him, but make it a multi-year deal, even if it's just 2 years, to keep him in town and keep this team competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. But now let's get to our final division, the NFC West, where we have the Arizona Cardinals up first, who they have an interesting draft decision that they can still do for next Thursday if they could trade back and get even more assets, possibly. But looking at their offseason, really no big moves again. Of course, the biggest move, if any, I would say is they traded for Desmond Ritter to be a backup, but traded away Rondale Moore in that deal. I don't know why. Clearly, that means they're going for wide receiver in round one. But their big signing, Bilal Nichols coming over, Chris Barnes, Mac Wilson. They got Sean Murphy Bunting. But people they lost, Hollywood Brown, of course. I had mentioned Rondale Moore. DJ Humphries is no longer there. And Antonio Hamilton. So this is a team still in the course of a rebuild. And they still have some big choices they can make between now and next Thursday come draft time.
Yeah, the ultimately I've been perplexed by what's going on in Arizona. Um, because you feel like they've got this commitment to Kyler Murray that they want to keep him around and keep him in town. But it feels like a lot of moves that they're making, kind of shedding their wide receivers, and shaping up to be some kind of moves that make you feel like they're getting ready to reset and rebuild. So I just don't really know. Like you said, a lot of decisions still to be made for them come Thursday. But they sit at the number 4 spot, which would take the worst of whoever you believe the top 4 quarterbacks in this draft are. If you decide to go quarterback and trade away Kyler Murray, or trade down, get some assets, and be able to pick a little bit later, or you have your pick of whichever wide receiver you want there at number 4, because most likely it's going to be 3 quarterbacks going at the top.
Yeah, definitely. But we'll see what kind of trade offers that they will field for that number 4 pick. They will definitely listen to offers for it. Our next team, the Los Angeles Rams, they're a unique team because this is the first year since Jared Goff was picked number 1 overall that they will have a first round pick. I never thought I would see the Rams have another first round pick in my lifetime, but it will finally happen this year. And they have some things to fill on this roster. Of course, the big one, Aaron Donald officially retired this offseason. Automatically will be a first ballot Hall of Famer there, no doubt. Really, that's the main piece. Obviously, there's a couple of backups. It was Brian Allen, their starting center, Jonah Williams to the Vikings, Jordan Fuller, their safety to the Panthers. But they made some good signings, I think, in free agency that helped them out. They signed Jonah Jackson away from Detroit. That was a really solid deal, I think. Got Tre'Davious White on a really short 1-year, $10 million deal that, even though with the injuries, is still a really talented player. We know what he can do when he's healthy. And of course, my favorite move of the offseason, one of my favorite moves of the offseason, Cameron Curl going there on a 2-year, $13 million deal. Even though these are very minor moves for the Rams, I'm loving what they're doing. And keep in mind, this is a team that's made the playoffs despite all that struggle without having a first round pick, and now they're having one this year. Yeah, we're gonna see the Rams, I think, back in postseason play this next season, Austin.
Yeah, I really like what they've done. They've protected Matthew Stafford, trying to keep him healthy. And then, like you said, they've really attacked fixing this secondary, which I am really, really in love with. They didn't get too blinded by the fact that Aaron Donald retired. Obviously, they're still going to need to address that defensive line a little bit. Um, but something that was just a glaring issue for them last year was secondary. Obviously parted ways with Jalen Ramsey, and the secondary was just in shambles. To get Cameron Curl and to get Tre'Davious White, two guys that are really at the top of the class at their positions, really helps reset and reestablish this secondary as they look to build a new era on the defense now without Aaron Donald.
Yeah, but now let's move to the team in their division who hopefully has learned the overtime rules in the playoffs with some time in the offseason. That's the San Francisco 49ers. They have had to depart with some pieces because look, this is a team that's still looking to compete, and they had to let go of some guys due to making such big contracts for Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa, McCaffrey, and all those guys. One of the big pieces, Eric Armstead. We talked about him. He's gone. Chase Young, weren't able to keep him around. Javon Kinlaw, former first-round pick, is gone. Ray McLeod, one of their return guys, Randy Gregory. And as for their signings, really not a lot. Some of their major ones, I guess you could say, Joshua Dobbs coming in as a solid backup for Brock Purdy. Devondre Campbell was a good signing. Malik Collins acquired in a trade from the Texans. Leonard Floyd, Rock Ya-Sin. They seem to be bringing in a lot of veteran pieces because, look, this is a team we know is a Super Bowl contender at the end of the day. We know who their main guys are on the roster. Really, the only spot that's questioned still are still secondary. We always talk about they can improve that secondary in any sort of way. But now you're looking at that defensive tackle spot with, Kinlaw and Eric Armstead now gone.
Yeah, and I felt like, maybe one of those guys would go this offseason, but I really didn't expect them to lose both of them this offseason. So it's, again, I wonder what they're going to do on the defensive line. But look, they've got a lot of the core pieces still there. I think a lot of some of these additions are great players. They're going to help them out down the stretch here next season. But, it's just a matter of can they repeat success? Have teams figure them out? And Purdy, he was good last year. Can he be even better? Teams are going to work even harder to stop Christian McCaffrey in the run game and force him to throw the ball. Can he be better throwing the ball in these games? I think that's going to be something that's huge for them.
But now our final team is the Seattle Seahawks. Of course, their new coach, Mike Macdonald, and their surprising move to let Pete Carroll walk, which I don't care if it was mutual or if it wasn't. That's a grave mistake still, I think, by the Seahawks franchise.
Absolutely.
But looking at their offseason, it was a unique one. They let go of a couple of veteran pieces under Mike Macdonald and that roster for the Seahawks. But you take a look at what they were able to bring in. They brought in Kevon Wallace in the secondary, Laviska Shenault. You got Pharaoh Brown, George Fant, Laken Tomlinson, Nick Harris. They got a lot of O-line pieces to help out protect Geno Smith. They got Jonathan Hankins there. They re-signed Leonard Williams, Jerome Baker. And the intriguing one, it wasn't a blockbuster, but it was still interesting. Them acquiring Sam Howell from the Commanders in exchange for a 3rd and 5th round pick. That was one of the more, okay, that's kind of odd moves of the offseason because, they clearly have shown faith in Geno, but this is a very good move to get Sam Howell, a guy who has shown he can at least have experience as a starter in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Pete Carroll move. I think that was one of the more disappointing and foolish decisions made this offseason. Whatever the reasons may be that it happened, I think it's just bad all around. A guy who's been that kind of winner and that kind of successful for an organization and a franchise, I think it's disappointing for it to end just like that, especially while they seem to be on the brink of breaking back into the postseason and being competitive. But I do I do agree. I think they made some quality moves, and I really, just like you said, I really love this Sam Howell move. I think it was honestly right for the Commanders to kind of move on from him because they were never really committed to them. He was just there to be a young quarterback that filled the spot until they got a chance to draft their superstar. And obviously, that time has come, so it's time to move on. And this is a perfect opportunity for Seattle to not have to surrender a draft pick on drafting a quarterback who's going to sit behind Geno Smith, but a guy that can still develop, still learn, and clearly has shown his capability. I think that's a big thing as well. You draft a guy, you don't know how he's going to perform in the NFL. We've seen Sam Howell. We've seen the kind of success that he had last year in Washington. So this is a guy that could develop behind Geno Smith for maybe a year or two, and then he might be free to take the helm and be the starter there in Seattle and get himself another chance. I like the moves that they've made overall, and I think this is going to be an exciting team to watch next season.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's it for all of our NFL. We have caught up on everything, Austin. We are officially caught up on it all. Now, the only thing we got to do is get ready for the draft, which you all know what that means. It will be mock draft time later this week or up to this weekend. We will have our official mock draft out with trades, of course. All the QB spots are going to be intriguing. Michael Penix and Bo Nix, will they go in the first round? Will they not? How many wide receivers will we see go in this first round? A lot of teams could use wide receiver depth. This is going to be a very entertaining NFL draft, Austin, and I'm not going to lie to you, I can't wait for it.
Yeah, me either. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm ready to see, especially how the Chicago Bears get ready to shape. Hopefully, the next half decade of my life. So we'll see what happens, but I'm excited. I'm always excited for the draft. I'm always excited to do a mock draft, and this one feels extremely significant for me, especially.
Yeah, hey, no pressure, Bears, no pressure. Just gotta get it this time.
Yeah, no pressure. It's just time to finally do it right.
Yeah, but that's going to be it for this episode. Hope you all enjoyed it. I know it was a long one, but we wanted to catch up on everything NFL. Next week, we're going to, of course, we talk about the mock draft. Depending on what's going on currently in the NBA playoffs, we might wait another week and let more results get going, but we will post our official playoff predictions later this week. But that's going to be it for us. That's Austin Hill. I'm Austin Wader. We want to thank y'all for watching.